Welcome to this series of videos on accessibility requirements for public procurement of ICT products and services in Europe, the EN 301-549 standard. This is video number 12. It's sponsored by Microsoft and produced by Funka. My name is Susanna Lorin. I'm an accessibility expert with a long experience in standardization. In this video, we are going to look at two short chapters in one go, Chapter 12 and 13 of the EN standard. Chapter 12 covers documentation and support services, and Chapter 13 has to do with ICT providing relay or emergency service access. You may ask yourself what documentation, support services, relay, and emergency service access have in common. And the truth is, not much. But these two chapters are so small that they fit nicely into one video, and that's the reason for combining them here. Documentation and support services probably do not need an explanation. But relay service might be a new term. A relay service makes it possible to convert different communication modes so that persons who need speech, text, or sign language can communicate with each other via ICT. The emergency service access has to do with ICT that supports two-way communication and provide emergency services. Let's start with Chapter 12, Documentation and Support Services. The first subsection has to do with product documentation. The second subsection covers support services. The first requirement under product documentation is 12.1.1, Accessibility and Compatibility Features. You must list and explain how the accessibility features of the ICT is to be used. It doesn't matter if the accessibility feature is built into the ICT or if users have the possibility to use personal assistive technology. Still, it must be documented, either separately or as an integrated part of the ICT. The second requirement states that the documentation must be available in at least one accessible electronic format. This could be either a web format or a non-web format. If the documentation is provided in a web format, it must meet the requirements of Chapter 9. If the documentation is provided in a non-web format, it must meet the requirements of Chapter 10. So no matter what you choose, it has to be accessible. Of course, you can provide documentation in other formats as well, but you need to provide at least one of the ones mentioned here. The next subsection has to do with support services. Support services in this context could be, for example, help desks, call centers, technical support, relay services, and training services. But there could also be other kinds of support services. 12.2.2 covers information on accessibility and compatibility features. This requirement says that the support service must provide information on the accessibility features covered in the product documentation. This goes for both accessibility that is built into the ICT and the possibility to use personal assistive technology. The next requirement states that the communication must be effective. In this context, efficiency means that the user needs when it comes to communication can be catered for either directly or by referring to another service. 12.2.4 has to do with the accessibility of the documentation. It is exactly the same requirement as in 12.1.2, but now covering support service documentation. So let's repeat the essence. Documentation provided by support services must be available in at least one accessible electronic format. This could be either a web format or a non-web format. If the documentation is provided in a web format, it must meet the requirements of Chapter 9. If the documentation is provided in a non-web format, it must meet the requirements of Chapter 10. So no matter what you choose, it has to be accessible. Of course, you can provide documentation in other formats as well, but you need to provide at least one of the formats that are mentioned here. Chapter 13 has to do with relay or emergency service access. This chapter has three subsections. The first one is about relay services requirements. The second subsection has to do with access to relay services. And the third one covers access to emergency services. 13.1.1 explains that relay services make it possible for persons who have different communication needs to talk, text, or sign to each other via ICT, so that each person can use the most fitting mode or modes. For example, the user might be able to use the voice for speaking without being able to hear, so that voice works well in one direction of communication, but text or sign language must be used in the other. The relay service converts the mode to meet the needs of each user. This is often done by a human being. There are several types of conversions that need to be possible to make if all user needs should be catered for. 13.1.2 covers text relay services. This means that if the ICT is providing text relay services, text users and speech users can interact with each other when the different communication modes are converted. 13.1.3 states that if the ICT provides sign relay services, this means that sign language users and speech users can interact with each other when the different communication modes are converted. The next requirement says that if the ICT provides lip-reading relay services, this means that lip-reading users and voice phone users can interact with each other when the different communication modes are converted. 13.1.5 covers ICT that is providing captioned phone services. This assists deaf or hard of hearing users by converting the incoming part of a spoken dialogue into captions. The last requirement in this subsection is 13.1.6. It covers speech-to-speech relay services, which means that the relay service provides assistance between phone users with speech impairments or cognitive disabilities and any other user while communicating. The next subsection covers access to relay services. If the ICT supports two-way communication and provide relay services, this must be possible to use for outgoing and incoming calls. Two-way communication may include voice, real-time text, or video, and it can be provided by itself or in combinations supported by both the relay service and the ICT system. 13.3 is the last subsection of the EN standard. If the ICT supports two-way communication and provide emergency services, this must be possible to use for outgoing and incoming calls. Again, two-way communication may include voice, real-time text, or video, and it can be provided by itself or in combinations supported by both the relay service and the ICT system. Remember, it is important that the accessibility is documented in an accessible way. Two-way communication in both support services and emergency services must be possible to convert into a mode that fits all users. This is the last video in our series on the EN 301-549 standard. There is one video for each chapter in the standard. Good luck with your accessibility work, and thanks for watching.